Hi, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. This is Brian Stone from Equal Justice Works. I'm a program manager here, and I work on the AmeriCorps JD program. I'm joined by a number of colleagues for today's training. I want to thank all of you for attending this training, and I'm going to introduce, first of all, I'm joined by Will Walker and Tai Alex. They both work on the Elder Justice program here at Equal Justice Works. And then we're also joined by our partners at Justice and Aging, Natalie and Jennifer. You'll hear from them just a few minutes, but I wanted to start off by giving Will and Tai a chance to talk a little bit about the Elder Justice AmeriCorps program and Equal Justice Works. Just a housekeeping note, I wanted to note, if you have questions at all during the course of this training, please utilize the chat box. You should have a control panel in the top right-hand corner of your screen. So use the chat box to type in any questions, and we'll look through those and answer as many as we have time for towards the end of the presentation. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tai.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Equal Justice Works and to this webinar on the Elder Justice Program, the Elder Justice AmeriCorps program. We're so excited that you're going to be working with us on this project. You're in host sites located across the country, either working directly with Elder Justice AmeriCorps legal fellows or doing more general civil legal aid work that intersects with elder justice issues. So we're absolutely thrilled to have you as part of the Equal Justice Works Network, as AmeriCorps JD members doing your summer of service amidst your rigorous law studies. So welcome and thank you very much. I'm just going to say a few words about what Elder Justice AmeriCorps is, sort of the focus of the project, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Will to talk a little bit more about what your specific role is going to look like at your host sites, and it will differ from site to site. So this project was launched in the fall of last year. We have 25 full-time legal fellows at host sites located across the country that are focused specifically on the provision of legal services for victims of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. There's sort of three prongs to the project. There's sort of three central prongs, one of which is direct service, which includes a variety of different kinds of legal aid to victims of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. There's a component where the fellows and law students, in your case, if you're working directly with the fellows, are working to develop, strengthen, and even create multidisciplinary teams that are focused on elder justice issues specifically. And then the final component is recruitment and training of volunteer legal professionals. And this could include, for example, pro bono attorneys in the form of trainings and clinics to really leverage additional resources and seed the field for legal professionals that are aware of this as an issue and are able to provide assistance more comprehensively to the victims. So that's sort of generally what this project is. It's a project that's duly funded by the Department of Justice Office for Victims of Crime, AmeriCorps through the Corporation for National and Community Service, through the Weinberg Foundation, and Equal Justice Works. And you're going to hear soon from our partners at Justice and Aging. They are leading experts, national experts on elder justice issues, and we're very privileged to have them as partners on this project. They're going to provide some really amazing substantive training to you all, which is going to be extremely informative and useful to you in the summer. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Will, who's going to talk a little bit more about kind of specifically what your role might look like at your host site.
Yes, and so as Tai kind of alluded to, some of you might be serving with the full-time attorneys who are serving as fellows in the full-time program, and others of you might just be working in other legal aid organizations providing more general legal services and providing legal assistance or conducting intakes for clientele that might include older adults or that will likely include older adults and for which these issues might become relevant. And so we hope you're able to learn from this and are able to take that in your service this summer. And a little bit more about what Equal Justice Works' role is. Basically, our mission is to create a just society by mobilizing the next generation of public interest lawyers. And through one of the ways that we do that is through having programs like this for law students, as well as fellowship opportunities for lawyers once they graduate. we also, so as I mentioned, we administrate this grant as well as some other AmeriCorps grants as well, and provide support to USJD members and the full-time fellows and the sites that we work with on these programs. And then finally, we report to CNCS, who funds AmeriCorps programs, on all the outcomes of service that you all do. And I'll hand it over to Brian to talk about the AmeriCorps JD specific components that you should be aware of before you start.
Thanks, Will. So I wanted to highlight just two things for you all. So as AmeriCorps JD members, you've all been accepted into the program. You've all reviewed the initial training webinar that details all the service requirements that you're required to fulfill as an AmeriCorps member. And then there's just two things I want to talk about today. The first is the member work plan that's available within your SAM home screen. I've posted a screenshot of what the work plan looks like here. This work plan is an opportunity for you to work with your supervisor at your host site to create a concrete plan to achieve goals, SMART goals for the summer. And so this should include a plan for cultivating the specific skills and professional development skills that you want to achieve as part of your project this summer. And then technically, you should have completed this work plan within the first 10 days of starting. I know that many of you just started last week, some of you have started this week as well. So be thinking about that as you listen to the presentation today, as you hear about the different types of cases and legal remedies facing the targeted client population. These are the activities that you should be including in your work plan. And so you can put specific numerical goals in the top portion of the work plan, and below it you can list the percentage breakdown of how you want to spend your time working on activities this summer. So again, this work plan is meant to be a tool for you in order to complete your goals this summer. And then finally, I wanted to touch on the final report that you will be required to complete at the end of the summer. So you should be tracking the number of people that you serve and any positive outcomes that are a result of your service this summer. So we realize that not all of you will be working exclusively on cases with older clients, but we should still be tracking the information from each of the cases that you do provide support on. And specifically for the Elder Justice AmeriCorps program, the 3 program goals are listed for you at the bottom. First is that older adults, and that specifically talking about people who are 60 years or older. So these older adults will receive legal assistance regarding an elder abuse matter. Secondly, older adults will have their legal issues resolved. And then thirdly, you'll be more broadly increasing the capacity for legal professionals within your host organization and with the other organizations that could be in your community, that you're increasing their capacity to address elder abuse issues. So those are the 3 goals we're thinking about as you create your work plans. Those are the 3 goals we're thinking about as you're tracking data from your service this summer. And if you have any questions at any point, I just want to emphasize that you should feel free to reach out to that AmeriCorps JD at equaljusticeworks.org email address. Myself and my colleague David will be more than happy to respond to your questions in any regard to SAM, tracking hours, completing criminal history checks, or completing the work plan or final report. So we really are here to help support you and make sure that your summer project this summer is fulfilling and rewarding. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie at Justice and Aging, and they will get started with the more substantive legal training. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I am Natalie Keene, and I'm joined by my colleague Jennifer Goldberg, and we're both attorneys on the healthcare team at Justice and Aging. So for 45 years, Justice and Aging has been using the power of law to fight senior poverty and secure access to healthcare, economic security, and the courts for older adults with limited resources. We focus on breaking down barriers for those who face the largest disparities in health and wealth, especially populations that have traditionally lacked legal protection, such as women, people of color, LGBT individuals, and people with limited English proficiency. And we are extremely pleased to be working with Equal Justice Works and to provide training today and throughout your experience with the Elder Justice Program. So today I'm going to provide some background on older adults and poverty, and then Jennifer will talk more in depth about elder abuse and some of the cases and issues you might encounter in your work. So first, we want to provide some context for the elder justice issues we work on and that you'll encounter, including elder abuse. Many of these issues relate directly to poverty, which is a widespread and growing threat to seniors in our country. And how many seniors live in poverty differs by poverty measurement. Traditionally, the Census Bureau has estimated poverty rates using the official poverty measure, which was created in the early 1960s. But in response to concerns about the measure being outdated and not accurately reflective of individuals' incomes and resources, the Census Bureau released an alternative measure in 2011 known as the Supplemental Poverty Measure. And so as you can see, under the supplemental measure, the Census Bureau estimates that 15% of seniors live in poverty compared to 9% under the official poverty measure. The difference is due in large part to the fact that the supplemental measure deducts health expenses from income. But perhaps even more important to understanding the threat of poverty to our seniors is that 48% are economically vulnerable. So that means they're living under 200% of the poverty threshold. So in terms of numbers, this translates to 6.5 million seniors living in poverty, with 1 million more expected in the near future. So who are the most economically vulnerable seniors? Those who are older. This chart shows that more than half of seniors over age 80 live below 200% of the federal poverty level, and nearly 20% at less than the federal poverty level. And women and people of color are more impacted by poverty. On the right, you see 12.1% of older women versus 7.4% of older men live in poverty. And on the left, you see the poverty rate for Asians, Hispanics, and Blacks is at least twice that of whites. Health is also connected to poverty. Seniors who are in fair or poor health are much more likely to live in poverty. And as I mentioned, these numbers are unfortunately rising, including especially high expected growth in homelessness and food insecurity among seniors. So we take a look at why poverty is such an issue for seniors, and there are systemic causes. We have more seniors now due to the baby boomers aging. Also, costs are rising and the economy is recovering from a big recession. But of particular concern to us in our work are the shrinking safety net and discrimination that seniors face. So to fight poverty, we need to ensure seniors have health care and long-term services and supports, housing, food, income, and the focus of your work, protection from abuse. So now I will turn it over to my colleague Jennifer to talk more about elder abuse.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Goldberg. I'm one of the directing attorneys at Justice and Aging, and I have had the opportunity to work closely with the Elder Justice AmeriCorps Fellows, and I'm excited to be doing this presentation for the JD program as well. So we're going to start off and go in a little bit more detail about what elder abuse is. Looking at the Older Americans Act definition of abuse, it's the knowing infliction of physical or psychological harm or knowing deprivation of goods or services that are necessary for essential needs or to avoid harm. So that's sort of our baseline, and the Older Americans Act has a set of definitions for elder abuse, neglect, exploitation, a whole range of issues. So elder abuse includes a range of different types of issues. It includes physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse. It includes neglect of the person, as well as self-neglect when someone is not able to take care of themselves, abandonment, and financial exploitation. And in the legal services setting in particular, financial exploitation is something that you may see. Elder abuse can occur anywhere. It can occur at home. It can occur in institutional settings, such as nursing facilities, or in community settings like assisted living or adult daycare, or anywhere where older adults are. So when we're thinking about who is perpetrating this abuse, there are a wide range of different types of abusers, but more than half of the abuse, this chart in particular examines financial exploitation, and more than half of abusers and perpetrators of elder financial abuse are family members. And when you add to that the nearly 20% that are friends and neighbors or a paid home aide, almost everyone is someone that the older adult knows. There are relatively few cases of abuse that are really just strangers. It's someone who knows the person, and that's part of what makes it so difficult and dangerous for the vulnerable older adults. And elder abuse does have a tremendous array of harms that can come to older adults: physical harm, emotional harm, and that makes sense when we're talking immediately about physical abuse or sexual abuse or something where the physical harm is obvious, but the emotional harm can come from any of these forms of abuse. Financial harm, elder abuse can happen at any income level, but it can cause and intensify poverty in particular, and that's something that people may see in a legal services setting. Elder abuse may cause difficulty in accessing needed public benefits such as Medicaid to pay for health care or someone's Social Security check. And overall, elder abuse comes with a lot of increased risks of an older adult having to go into a hospital, into a nursing home, and even increased risks of death. When we look at the numbers, we know that at least 10% of all older adults experience some type of elder abuse. And overall, with most of these numbers, we think that people are underreporting elder abuse. So these numbers are actually lower than what is happening in real life. Financial abuse is most common. There was a MetLife study that found that 1 in 20 adults will be affected by financial abuse after age 60. So that's a pretty high number of people in our society. And they also found a $2.9 billion loss to those victims overall. So that's really just an enormous amount of money that is being siphoned away from the older members of our community. There are a lot of different types of financial abuse. As I said, this is one of the ones that may be most commonly seen in a legal services setting, and it could come in the form of someone misusing a check, misusing a bank account, a credit card. One example from an Elder Justice AmeriCorps member was a son who used his mother's credit card to make $11,000 worth of purchases, most of which were made on the day of the mother's sister's funeral, a day where she certainly was not out spending with her credit card. And the mom didn't find out about these purchases because the son was taking her mail, so she wouldn't find out her exact credit card balance. So that type of thing is one of the ways in which you can see elder financial abuse. Other examples could be someone who is misusing a power of attorney and stealing money from someone's account, identity theft, scams. There was one of the clients of an Elder Justice AmeriCorps member was told that she had won a lottery and that she had won $1 million and a new car for her son, but all she had to do was send them checks for the fees. And so she sent 4 checks, each to them $9,000, and shared her bank account information with those telephone scammers. So these are all the types of things that can happen with financial abuse. There's a range of potential legal remedies that could be obtained as a result of these abusive behaviors. And these are among the remedies that that a legal services office may be able to put into place for a victim of elder abuse. First of all, if there's a problem with a power of attorney or some other advanced planning document, one remedy is to revoke that power of attorney. To obtain, if there's a physical abuse situation, one could obtain an order of protection against the abuser. If the abuser and the victim are in a legal relationship with each other, for example, if they're married or if there's a landlord-tenant relationship, the legal services organization an attorney can be involved in ending that relationship, helping to get a divorce or get someone out of the house. There are a lot of potential legal issues related to guardianship or conservatorship that could address elder abuse issues, either seeking guardianship, opposing guardianship, a range of different remedies available there. Likewise, in the case of financial abuse, seeking an accounting, a listing of what a power of attorney or a guardian did with someone else's money is another legal remedy, and could help you try to recover assets or stop any transfers or void any documents to try to get someone's financial affairs back in order and get their money back. And you could also attempt to obtain damages. Now, when someone comes in the door, they don't always announce themselves by saying, "Hi, I'm here because I have a problem with elder abuse." Often they may come into a legal services office because they're actually the elder abuse has caused another legal problem for them, and they're trying to get that other legal problem addressed. So elder abuse victims may require legal assistance in a wide range of different types of cases. They could come in and need help with public benefits. When I was working at Maryland Legal Aid, I worked there for 14 years before I came here to Justice and Aging. Frequently, we saw clients who came to us because they were having problems with Medicaid or problems with Social Security. And when we dug deeper and trying to find out what the problem was, we were able to discover an elder abuse situation. People who may not be able to access Medicaid to help them pay for a nursing home, or people who may not be getting their Social Security check properly because they're being abused. In addition to those public benefits cases, elder abuse cases can arise in consumer situations where someone is having a problem with debt collection or credit card as a result of elder abuse. Housing cases If the person who is abusing the older adult is living in the older adult's home, they may be seeking to evict them. There may be a problem with foreclosure if the person, if the older adult's representative was supposed to be paying the mortgage but didn't do so, and so their house is being foreclosed upon. Victims could also be represented in a range of different types of family law cases, whether those are divorce cases or guardianship or protective orders, as I mentioned earlier. There's a range of help that someone could need where an attorney would be able to assist them in a way that others simply cannot. And then in planning, looking at advanced planning, when someone is creating a power of attorney or trying to revoke a prior power of attorney, legal services can be incredibly vital to work with victims in those circumstances as well. In our next section, we're going to talk a little bit about intake strategies. We're going to talk a bit about how, what some of the best practices are for working with older adults, some interviewing tips, and ways that you can work with other people in your agency to ensure that older adults and people, particularly who are victims of elder abuse, are able to get everything that they need. So, starting off by talking about, in general, communications with older clients, and this is what I'm about to talk about are true for many communications with many different types of clients, but I'm going to highlight some of the issues that may be particularly relevant when you're serving an older population. So of course, whenever you're talking with someone and you want to have them give you information that might be uncomfortable for them, and talking about elder abuse is certainly something that's uncomfortable for people, it's really important to develop trust and to make sure that people understand about client confidentiality, that what they say to you is confidential, that what they talk about with an attorney is confidential, and what your role is within the organization. Recognizing that, of course, you are not an attorney, you're a law student, and explaining to them how that works. When you're talking to older clients, frequently someone else may have, if it's in person, someone else may have brought them to the office, or if it's on the telephone, there may be someone else who is calling for them. It's important to try to speak with the older adult themselves without any family members or other representatives present. And that, of course, goes back to confidentiality, but also relates to the sensitive nature of elder abuse and the fact that you won't know starting off when you're just doing an initial intake and you're doing some basic screening with someone, whether elder abuse could be an issue, and you don't know what any of the issues are going to be, and so you want to be able to talk to the person individually. So, as I said, older adults, when you say that, though, they may say that they want to have their family member or other representative involved. And so you'll have to talk with people at the organization where you work what their procedures are for that. Frequently, what an organization wants to do is identify whether that third party has a formal role for the person. Is the third party a power of attorney, the attorney in fact, or is that person a guardian? If they are in one of those formal roles, you will want to get a copy of the document that shows that, so the guardianship order or the actual power of attorney document, to be able to include that. And there may be some people where you will need to have communication with that third party, that the older adult can't have that communication themselves, and that's when you want to make sure that their role is clarified. And in particular, one of the reasons you want to clarify that role is because of the risk of undue influence. Undue influence is different than elder abuse. It's when someone is exerting their power over someone else or their relationship with someone else to influence them to do something that isn't in their interest is in the interest of the other person, and that can be highly correlated and related to elder abuse. So once you've set up a situation in which you are going to be, for example, talking with someone on the phone or meeting them in person, particularly if you're meeting someone in person, you want to make sure that you're accommodating any physical health needs that the person has. This is true for people of all ages because people may have disabilities, but it's particularly true for older adults. You'll want to think about what is the best time of day for this person to be able to do an intake. Sometimes clients are taking medication for which certain times of day are better than others for them to be able to understand information and talk to you. When you're doing an intake, you'll want to make sure you're minimizing background noise. This is particularly important if you are talking by telephone. You don't want to be in if you can be in an area where it's quieter around you, it will be easier for the person to be able to hear you and understand what you're saying. True for in-person interviews as well. If you're in a situation where you're providing someone with paperwork, you want to make sure that it could be available in large print if that's needed for clients who have low vision. And if you're providing intake in a specific location, you want to make sure that that location is accessible to anyone who would be using it. In addition to the physical health needs, you also want to think about how can you accommodate any cognitive impairment. And as I said, this is true for adults of all ages who may have a disability that would require accommodation, but particularly true for older adults who may be in the early stages of dementia. And that type of impairment is not something that would necessarily preclude your organization from being able to represent the client, but you would want to think carefully about how can you accommodate that to maximize capacity for that person. Some of the ways that you can do that are by deliberately asking shorter questions, doing your questions in stages rather than one long run-on all at once. Allowing more time for someone to answer you. So pauses can be your friend, letting people think about the answer, being patient if someone is taking a long time in responding and not interrupting, just letting them have the time they need to respond. Some clients may respond better with several short interviews rather than one long interview. And in particular, for clients with Alzheimer's disease and dementia, sometimes they experience what's called sundowning, where their ability to understand and participate in the conversation will decrease as the day goes on, and they will have a harder time in the evening. And in those situations, you would want to make sure to offer a morning or a midday option for talking with them. As part of the discussion that you're having in any intake, there may be a screening process for elder abuse. And I wanted to give you some tips on how you talk about that screening process. One thing is to make sure you tell clients that you ask these questions to everybody. And that should be, in fact, your procedure. The best way to do screening is to screen everyone. It's very hard you can't know ahead of time who is going to answer yes to these questions. And by telling them up front that you're going to be asking these questions to everyone, then they will feel more comfortable with being asked. Likewise, by asking these questions, the client will know that you can help in the future even if they don't disclose any abuse now. You should tell the person that they can always come back for help with this, so that if they're perhaps not comfortable disclosing a situation at the moment, they may be more comfortable doing so later on. And then this type of screening can help determine whether there's some type of protective or preventive action that your organization would want to take, and the supervisor that you're working with would make that determination. So as you're going through this intake process, Anyone can be a victim of elder abuse, but there are some risk factors that make it more likely and that you should be watching out for. One of them is individuals who do have diminished capacity, such as older adults with dementia. By some estimates, as many as half of the older adults with dementia have experienced some form of abuse. Social isolation, people who are being separated from their families or do not have, only have one person that they're relying on and nobody's watching over that person, may be at greater risk. And then a family history of domestic violence. If that is part of the family dynamic, it is more likely to come out in the elder abuse situation as well. I wanted to go through specifically with some signs of financial exploitation, because that's definitely a form of elder abuse that you may see in the legal services context. So when you're looking for signs of financial exploitation, you can look at unusual financial activities, whether someone has unpaid bills that when they used to be paying them, when there are different signatures on checks, when there's a sudden disappearance of funds from someone's account and they don't know where it went, or they had a possession before and now it's gone. If there are new people who are suddenly taking an interest in them, if they tell them that if the person says, well, there was this new neighbor who moved in from next door and she's being so helpful, she comes over every day and helps me write all my checks, that's definitely a red flag. When there are changes in the way that someone has set up their financial affairs, if they all of a sudden have closed all their bank accounts and are opening a new one at a new bank, or they've transferred money, those are all signs that financial exploitation could be occurring. So the last section of our presentation before we get up to opening it up for questions is to talk a little bit about vicarious trauma. So doing this work is hard. It's difficult to hear people's stories of what is happening in their lives, and their stories are often very emotional and can have an emotional impact on the person listening to them. And so we want to talk with you a little bit today about what vicarious or secondary trauma is, and then what you can do about it. So first, let's just start off by defining it. So vicarious or secondary trauma is when people experience traumatic stress by observing or bearing witness to stories of traumatic events. So by listening to what has happened to these clients, one could experience secondary trauma. This isn't just the regular work stress of, oh, this is a lot to do and I am finding it difficult to be in this new environment. This is added emotional or personal feelings that go on with having heard these traumatic stories and starting to internalize them. And this type of secondary trauma can be cumulative as well. So hearing one story may not cause the situation, but after you keep listening to these stories or you spend a lot of time and you're having difficulty separating from them, then that's where it is more likely to become a problem. Once we recognize that secondary trauma exists, in order to continue to do this type of work, it's really important to find ways of managing it. So these are the ABCs of managing secondary trauma, and I'm going to walk through each one of them. First is just awareness. So the first thing to do is acknowledge if you have your own history of trauma and how it may be triggered. Many people who go into helping professions do so because they have some sort of traumatic event in their own life. And so recognizing that and recognizing that it may be triggered by working with people who are also having traumatic events is an important part of managing that trauma. The second point here is to be aware of how is your lifestyle affecting your ability to do your work? And these are the basic things. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating healthy foods? Are you able to exercise? Are you able to take care of yourself? And being aware of how you're taking care of yourself. And that self-care is often something that we need to define individually. So what do you need to take care of yourself? And that being aware of that and keeping in mind whether you're doing that for yourself is a big part of the first section of managing secondary trauma awareness. The second part of it is balance. So once you recognize that these feelings might be taking place for you, it's important to let yourself have some emotional reactions. You don't want to block it off and just completely deny that those feelings are taking place. But at the same time, it's in order to keep doing this work, it's really important to set some clear boundaries for yourself. Setting clear work boundaries is probably the biggest thing that I've spent time as a legal aid supervisor talking to some of my newer staff members about, finding ways that you can separate the work that you're doing every day and the rest of your sort of home life, and recognizing that achieving that type of work-life balance and at some point putting aside these stories so that you can go on with the rest of what you need to do in your regular everyday life is important, and it's what allows you to keep doing this type of work and not burn out. And then, so that's B, balance. And then the C is connection. And that's really where working with other people makes the biggest difference. So you can talk to your colleagues, you can talk to supervisors. There may be a procedure in your organization for how people manage and address this type of situation and when they have these types of feelings or how they're dealing with them. You can also talk to family and friends about what you're experiencing. Maintaining connections to other people is a critical part of managing any form of trauma, including secondary trauma. So the next slide here shows a number of different resources that are available about elder abuse. For today, we're just able to start talking about the different things that are available, but the National Center on Elder Abuse has a broad range of materials available. The Department of Justice has its own online elder abuse training for legal services providers, and there are a range of elder financial abuse resources that are also available. And Justice and Aging has the ability to provide detailed assistance as well. We have a webinar that's the legal basics of elder abuse that's available on our website, and I've put the link on the slides. And so this sort of was a bit of that, but that's a more extensive version of the training, and it also has a chapter summary, a written chapter summary that goes with it, so that you don't have to necessarily even watch the whole webinar. You can just download the slides or take a look at the written chapter summary. And case consultation is also available through Justice and Aging, through our National Center on Law and Elder Rights, NCLR. And that case consultation is available free for legal services advocates and any other professionals who are working with older adults. So that could be law students or paralegals or attorneys or social service providers, anyone who is having an issue that relates to one of their clients and wants further assistance, is if they can email us for case consultation assistance. And so with that, I think it's time to open it up for questions. Do we have any questions either about our section or about the earlier section that Brian and Will presented?
Yeah, we're just having the questions roll in now. So I'll give folks just a few more minutes to send in some questions. And then I'll jump back on and we can discuss the questions. All right, thanks everyone for your patience. I just wanted to look through the questions. We had a few come in right all at the last minute there. But the first question was about reporting, data reporting, and it asked about estimating benefits secured. This is one of the questions from the final report. And so specifically they ask about helping someone to qualify for long-term care Medicaid, which could result in a pretty hefty financial benefit. And so I would think that yes, you should include the amount of financial benefit that client could have received. But I also wanted to ask Jennifer and Natalie if they had any thoughts kind of from a real-world case about reporting on the financial benefits received from someone who's able to get Medicaid coverage. Natalie or Jennifer, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was talking away and not.
No problem.
And seems to have been muted.
No. Oh.
This is Jennifer. Can be. I wanted to add in about.
Go ahead.
So the question, I believe, is about the benefits for particularly something like long-term care Medicaid. And I would suggest looking at benefits for that 1 year. So what the value of the Medicaid benefit would be for 1 year, say, of nursing home care or in-home care or whatever the type of care that you've procured for the client would be. And that's a pretty common practice of the way that people report benefits, because after the year, their person may, usually benefits need to be, you need to reapply or have a renewal process, and so 1 year is usually the amount that people report in this type of reporting.
Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. The next question was about information regarding Native Americans not being included in the senior poverty presentation. I think that was one of the earlier slides, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this is Natalie. No particular reason, but there certainly are statistics available on poverty among Native Americans. We'd be happy to follow up with some links to information on that.
Yes, I think that particular slide is based on a set of data and a study that did not include separating out Native Americans, so we didn't in that chart. But there are a number of groups and a number of ways that we did not include, and we're happy to talk more about the impact of poverty on a range of different diverse populations.
Great. So we can, if the person who asked that question would like more specific follow-up on that, our email addresses are, well, you can see Jennifer's email address on the slide now, and then we're also happy to provide any other contact information if you want to reach out to us. The next question was about where someone could find the work plan on SAM. So I discussed the work plan at the beginning of the presentation. On SAM, it's at the very bottom of the application section. So right underneath the member service agreement, it says work plan, and so you just click the button that says work plan, and you can fill it out that way. Okay, the next question asks when a senior or older person is not willing to report abuse or pressure or pursue a legal remedy against the abuser, how do you navigate that? Kind of a trickier answer, I think, but Natalie or Jennifer, do you want to share some remarks or feelings about that.
Yeah, and this is Tai. Do you guys mind if I just jump into? I'm going to defer. Hi everyone, this is Tai again. I'm going to defer Jennifer and Natalie on this for sure, but I think just from our standpoint, from the programmatic side, and I'm just looking at the question here. I would say, you know, really, I think always the goal from our perspective is to follow what the client's wishes are, right? Particularly because this is civil legal aid and we're not operating from the basis of we're not operating under, the sort of prosecutor model where there might be, you're not working to prosecute the crime, you're working to address the civil legal needs that are arising from the issues concerning the victim, right? So I think that really what they would like to happen is kind of paramount. But I think it is a really important question. That's where I do want to get Jennifer and Natalie's feedback, and I think it also depends on the specific facts, right? So it really does depend on the circumstances. If you think that someone's safety is at risk, then that's an issue where you might need to intervene. But if someone is choosing not to proceed with, for instance, a housing matter or a benefits matter because they were electing not to, I think their autonomy in that decision making is important. Jennifer and Natalie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
This is Jennifer. I was going to say pretty much the same thing. I think that it is incredibly important to recognize that older adults can make decisions for themselves, and they can sometimes make decisions that people you may not agree with. But they have the right to do that, and our role in legal services is to represent them in what they want. Now, part of the role in legal services is also to do counseling for clients. So you need to explain to them, here are the potential ramifications of what it would mean to report or not report, pursue a particular legal remedy or not pursue it. But once you have explained those ramifications and done that counseling, and they really understand what their choices are, their choices are really up to them, and they need to be able to be empowered to make those decisions, and we can't make decisions for other people.
Great, thank you for those answers. I want to move on to a couple other logistical type questions. One person asked if the PowerPoint slides will be available. Yes, we will make sure that all of the Elder Justice AmeriCorps law student members do receive the PowerPoint slides as well as this recording. And then we have a couple questions asking about if the work plan is required or if it's recommended. Both, yes, it is recommended and it is required. There's a follow-up question about trouble with estimating specific numbers to put into the work plan. Give your best estimates based upon your supervising attorney's experience, and you can look at past years' records of number of clients who came in for the summer. One other thing I want to point out is that for those members who are serving at host sites directly alongside of the full-time legal fellows, do not double count or double report any of the cases. So if your work is largely in support of cases that the Equal Justice Works Elder Justice AmeriCorps member is working on, then you, in your final report, don't include those case numbers, but do include that in your work plan as what you plan to work on for the summer. A question asked if individuals need to help a certain number of people or have a certain number of successful outcomes to obtain the education award. The answer to that is no. So we put the overall objectives and goals of the program at the beginning of the presentation, but as a law student, those are what you should be working for, but you don't need to obtain a certain number of clients or positive outcomes in order to receive the education award. Those are unrelated. Okay, this is a great question. For those of you working at host organizations where you're not primarily serving on elder abuse cases, yes, you should still report the numbers of the cases that you're working on. If you look in the final report, and this is at the end, the very bottom of your SAM page, there's different categories for reporting on client outcomes. And so you should just, there's a general category at the top, so put any general cases at the top, and then there's an opportunity to differentiate among types of cases lower on down the page. And so you should differentiate if you have the ability to fit into those categories. If your cases aren't from one of those categories, then just put them in the general number reporting at the top. Okay, there's a question I think would be good for justice and aging. That the handle says, have there been any experiences with mediation or alternative dispute resolution?
I'm going to jump in again. This is Thais. I'm just going to hop in from the programmatic side, and I think, but I do want to hand it over to Justice and Aging for big picture in terms of mediation and conflict resolution with regards to elder justice issues generally. I would say, and of course, as it relates to this program too, if you all have insight into this, but I would say for the purposes of this program, absolutely, mediation and conflict resolution can be an incredibly useful tool. I think that what would be sort of the critical question I would ask is between whom and sort of what the circumstances are, right? So if I think that mediation or conflict resolution between a victim and an abuser may not be appropriate, likely is not appropriate. And so I think it's really kind of figuring out what your role would be in that. So whether you'd be referring for conflict resolution services, whether you'd be partnering with a mediator, but I would not encourage you at this stage to be taking on that role of mediator. While it is an extremely important tool to be utilized, generally speaking in litigation, I think that in these cases in particular, when someone's the victim of abuse, that you're going to have to, tread very lightly when it comes to potentially playing that kind of role. What do you think, Jennifer and Natalie?
I would have the same reaction. I think that overall, mediation and alternative dispute resolution are something that people are actively pursuing in work with older adults more broadly, but in any sort of abuse context, whether it's elder abuse or domestic violence, there are some real red flags about power imbalances that can take place in those settings. And so one would need to tread very lightly.
Great, thanks so much, Jennifer. Great, so we have a few more questions.
I saw one question earlier on about tips on working with seniors who may lack capacity. And so we did speak a little bit about that earlier in the webinar about how you can work with individuals with cognitive impairments, and how much you can work with someone who has diminished capacity is a combination of sort of ways to help increase their capacity. Capacity is not an on-off switch. It's not either you have it or you don't. People can be in situations where they are capacity to do what is the question, so they may have capacity to do some things and not others. And then also, you need to really look at the ethical rules around representing individuals with diminished capacity, and Rule 1.14 of the Rules of Professional Conduct is the right place to start in trying to figure that out. The American Bar Association has put together a wonderful handbook on assessing capacity for older adults in the legal context, and I will share with Thais and everyone at Equal Justice Works that link that we can share with everyone as well.
Thank you. That'd be great. We can include that when we send out the recording and the notes from the webinar. And then the next one, thanks for catching that question. Sorry I missed it. The next one is about if you have any pointers on communicating with elderly individuals who are hard of hearing or seeing, but then also with individuals who may have low education levels.
Sure. So you want to really try to put information in as simple terms as possible and really talk to someone and ask them questions that don't have just a yes/no answer, but where you can see, are they understanding you, and see if they can reflect back to you what you're talking about, so you'll know what you need to go over again. Natalie, do you have some other pointers on working with individuals who may have low education or literacy levels? I know that's something you've done a fair amount of in different contexts.
Yeah, I think you know, a lot of these things do apply across the board, but you know, again, shorter answers and being you know, aware of, yeah, not providing maybe materials in writing, or you know, finding those ways to assess whether someone is comprehending the conversation, because I think a lot of times individuals can be shy about admitting that that maybe they don't understand or don't follow. So, you know, again, just going slowly and checking in and phrasing questions in a way that ensures that they can explain their level of understanding.
Yeah, and this is another thing I would just also recommend, going back to sort of client autonomy and folks being able to, you know, kind of check, as Natalie said, checking in with the client and getting feedback from them. I think that where it's appropriate, asking that question and you know, kind of saying, you know, do you have a preference in, you know, and I'm just going to give an example of how it could be phrased, but it could be phrased in a variety of different ways, but sort of checking in to find out how the client is comfortable communicating and basing the communication off of that, because it's not going to be a standard way with every single client. It really is going to depend on the circumstances, and this wasn't the specific question, but I know this has come up a lot with our fellows, where often fellows communicate by phone with the clients because there could be access or mobility considerations. So just kind of thinking about that too, that you may often have conversations with clients by phone and not in person, and sort of thinking about what works best for them. And I think some of the points that Justice and Aging raised about kind of time of day and things like that, where the environment, if they're able to have a confidential conversation with you by phone, all of those things are things just to kind of keep on your radar.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that, in dealing with kind of clients in general, regardless of whether or not they might be older adults, is particularly when you're interacting with those who might have low education levels or might not be able to read, is potentially if they're filling out a form, maybe reading the form out to them, making sure that they understand what they're filling out and everything, and always kind of keep those considerations in mind while people are dealing with potentially complicated or confusing documents.
Yeah, and then the final thing is, I would really, for those of you that are at host sites with Elder Justice Fellows, please do talk to your fellows as much as possible. They've been in the field now for 9 months and they have experience, so really do utilize their expertise. Of course, you're always welcome to contact us if anything specific comes up and you have a concern. And then also your host sites, so your direct supervisors that have been doing this, you know, this work or very similar work for a very long time, usually, and have a lot of experience. And there's usually, even if it's not your direct supervisor, there's other folks in the office who do have the experience. So try to utilize the folks that you're working with on a day-to-day basis as much as possible as a resource.
Excellent. Okay, we have 2 final questions here that both deal with performance and data reporting. One person just asked about if they have been serving for more than 10 days and haven't submitted it yet. Please do so as soon as possible. There's no penalties if you didn't submit within the first 10 days, but that will be required before you complete your service. So, and I think it makes more sense to do it at the beginning of your project. So do try to get that in as soon as possible. And then more generally, in talking about the performance reporting, if you are afraid that you're going to have low numbers, still give us the best estimate that you have available in conjunction with talking with your supervisor and other staff attorneys at your host site. We do need to have the best understanding of what is accurate, and we're not as concerned about low numbers. So just give us the most accurate presentation of what you will be working on, and then definitely at the end of the summer, again, prioritize accuracy over trying to make your project have inflated numbers or anything like that. We understand that you're law students and that all of your projects will differ in somewhat in terms of availability of clients and just the clients you walk through the door. So we're not looking for you to meet specific numbers of cases. We just want to be able to report accurately what you have worked on.
Yeah, and just one other thing to add to what Brian just said. I think that we do want to be deferential to your attorney supervisors if they have you on a sort of initial training plan where they have you working with one case versus a whole slew of cases. That's totally fine. And I think that, if you, after a few weeks of working on the project and you feel more comfortable, if you want to take on more, I would certainly encourage you to talk about that with your supervisor. But our goal is not to overwhelm you. We really, like as Brian was saying, we want to track accurately the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and there's someone asking if there are any more webinars online for legal information learning purposes. Jennifer kind of mentioned that there's an elder abuse basics training. Justice and Aging also has a kind of bi-monthly trainings on various topics in elder abuse, and they can speak more to what those look like, and they've archived and have made available the past webinars that they've done through that, and there will be more upcoming, so you can contact any of us and we can connect you to those webinars. And I can also open up to Jennifer to talk about more training resources that would be available for people who might be interested.
Yeah, and when we send out the recording for this webinar, we can include information about that from Justice and Aging, the stuff that Will just mentioned. And then the other thing just to add is that a lot of this, for those of you that are working with fellows, they are doing outreach presentations and trainings themselves, or they're attending trainings in the field. So please do talk to them about joining for those trainings. And then for those of you that are not working with fellows, if you're able to connect with any kind of outreach or clinics that are being done, if there's any opportunity to attend local trainings, please take advantage of that.
All right, we'll give you oh, I'm sorry, did you have something, Jennifer?
I was just going to say, Justice and Aging does have, we have a lot of webinars that are all archived and available to watch for free on our website, and we've been doing one legal basic per month and one advanced topic per month throughout calendar year 2017, and so those are all available on a range of different legal services topics, including quite a lot related to elder abuse. So we encourage you to take a look at those, and we'll send the link.
Yeah, and then a couple other resources. The Office for Victims of Crime at the Department of Justice has great online resources, and they have links to other resources. So definitely take advantage of that. To the extent that you're able to work on helping with multidisciplinary teams, there's an entire page with a coordinator who specializes in this at the Office for Victims of Crime. So we really encourage you to utilize that. And then, of course, if you haven't been on the website, I mean, I'm sure you have at some point, but we really encourage you to connect with AmeriCorps too. And once you're part of the My AmeriCorps portal, you can connect with, different resources, and you can go on the website and get, sort of great information about all of the different CNCF programs that are available, and there's different resources on there as well.
All right, I have not seen any new questions for the last few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and presume that we have answered everything for those who are still on the line. I want to thank you all again for attending today's webinar. As well, thank you for your summer service this summer as an AmeriCorps Elder Justice Law student member. If you have any questions again throughout the summer, we will be available via email or phone Justice and Aging, we can also get you in contact with, or I think Jennifer's email is on the screen right now. So thanks again to all of you, and best of luck on the rest of your summer projects. We'll be in touch.